Good morning from New Mexico and good noon from East Coast and good evening in South Africa. We're really happy to have this final session of Close It Distributed. As a reminder, Close It launched about 6 weeks ago, October 29th, and the distributed model, thanks to my co-founder, Kevin Clark, will run through May 26th, where we hope to be celebrating together in Santa Fe, New Mexico in May. I know I just read this morning that our own healthcare workers in Santa Fe are going to start getting the vaccine next week. So things are feeling promising. Thank you all for joining. All of the previous keynotes that have been extremely informative are posted in the community, the Participate community. And today I'm really honored to have two people that I've worked with a lot over the last few years speaking. Dr. Angela Jackson, who is a partner at New Profit and doing amazing work in the future of work, and Josh Copus, who is with JFF Labs and brings tons of expertise around the workforce system overall. So thank you all for joining, and I'm going to turn it over to you, Angela.
Wonderful. And I just sent an email to Tiffany. I'm hoping that you all can run the PowerPoint. Is that okay?
Yeah. Hey, Tiff, can you, you got it? You there?
Yep. Give me one moment. I'll have it right up.
Okay, wonderful. So while she's bringing that up, I'd love to just introduce myself. I'm Dr. Angela Jackson. I am a managing partner at New Profit, which is a Boston-based venture philanthropy firm. At New Profit, I lead our future of work investments and strategy. And one of our latest initiatives is the Future of Work Grand Challenge, which I will share with you all today. And really what we want to do with my partner, Josh Copus at JFF, is like really do an inside look at the challenge and talk about some of the decisions we made to make it intentionally center equity and really think about the people who are going to be most impacted by the future of work. So I will do a short presentation. I will then bring Josh on board and we will do a fireside chat and answer some of the questions that you might have. So perfect, we can go on to the next slide. So when I started looking at the future of work and New Profit, we had a couple of big questions that we were thinking about. One is, who is best suited to come up with the solutions for learners who come from challenging backgrounds and disinvested communities? What should those entrepreneurs and creators look like, and who should they be talking to? The second question we think a lot about at New Profit as it relates to our future of work strategy is, how can we incentivize the private sector, nonprofits, governments, and local communities to work in concert to develop innovative solutions? You know, as a philanthropy, you know, we had to really take a step back and then be a bit humble, right? To understand in this moment of unprecedented unemployment, that one philanthropy, one employer is not going to make the difference. We need unparalleled collaboration. And so when we thought about this, the challenges that are facing us, these are some of the questions that we'll address today. We can go to the next slide. So when we look at the pandemic, we had started working on the Future of Work Grand Challenge 4 years ago. And I came on board with New Profit 2 years ago. And literally what happened, we'd planned on launching this challenge in November of this year, but we moved it up to June because after the pandemic hit, there are a couple of things that we were all smacked in the face with, right? 86% of the people who were initially laid off due to coronavirus made less than $40,000 a year. And we knew that we had, with the Future of Work Grand Challenge, an opportunity to create solutions to help these people get back to work. We also knew, based on our research, that the workforce system and sector really wasn't working well for these people to begin with. And now they were being faced with, one, massive layoffs and furloughs, and two, being deemed essential employees, right, without the commensurate essential pay. And so we've been thinking about, again, how these low-wage workers could benefit most from these in-demand skills that would help them climb up to the next rung of employment and also have a sustaining wage. Next slide, please. So when we thought about this in devising our strategy, we had a couple of thought partners, and that included Walmart.org, Strata Education Network, the Joyce Foundation, Lumina Ventures, Accenture, and the Siegel Family Endowment. And we thought to ourselves, what if we could develop a strategy that could incentivize the leading minds in AI, behavioral psychology, experimental education to come together to develop solutions that could help get workers who are experiencing low wages jobs with higher skills. We thought, what if we could have them work together in a way to target this population that Opportunity at Work says that there's 73 million Americans who have the interest and the skills to do higher wage jobs, but not have the opportunity. What if we could develop a set of programs and solutions that would target these workers to, one, help them upskill, and two, to help them with the essential wraparound supports to find these pathways and higher wage jobs. Go to the next slide. And so what we came up with was the Future of Work Grand Challenge. And really what that is three-pronged strategy. We want to help Americans retrain quickly, especially in this moment of COVID. I talk to people every day. We have a workers advisory board, which I'll share with you. But, there was a mother that I was talking to. She's, upskilling her, working, doing remote schooling at home with her child during the day. At night, she's working an overnight shift. And in the time she has, she's doing some online classes. As she thinks about finding a new job, she doesn't have time or the money or just the wherewithal to go back to get a 4-year degree. She's looking at rapid accelerated learning programs. The second piece of it is we need to equip Americans with the job search and placement supports that they need. Think about our high school guidance counselor, whether they were good or bad, or college advising. It was always important to have someone in your life to help you navigate the options that exist in this world, especially that exist in the future of work. There are positions that are being created now that didn't exist when most of us, right, myself included, graduated from college. So it's really important to understand what these new opportunities are and how do you train for them. The last thing that we wanted to do with our strategy is to come up with solutions, a solution, an initiative that would help get 25,000 workers who'd been displaced by COVID back to work in jobs with living wages. And that was really important for us, that we center equity with our philanthropy. We know at this moment there are many people out there looking for jobs, but with the Future of Work Grand Challenge, we're really focusing on the people who have the most barriers to employment. So when we put out our challenge, we said to solution providers, we want you to focus on people who don't have a 4-year degree, people, job seekers who didn't make a living wage last year. And we want you to focus on getting them into jobs with a living wage and with pathways. We can go to the next slide. So what we came up with, we've evolved from our first set of ideation partners to a larger group of partners. Some of them, Jobs for the Future, X Prize, MIT Solves. There are operating partners, there are boots on the ground. Our funding partners include lead sponsors, Walmart.org, Strata Education Network, but we're also working with the Joyce Foundation, Lumina Ventures, the Annie Casey Foundation, the Kellogg Foundation, Accenture, the Mortgage Family Foundation, Fossil Foundation, JP Morgan Chase, Comcast Universal, Jobcase, and other partners like Brandeis University, who's helping us with our research agenda, Harvard University, and Goodwill Industries. Beyond being a slide with a bunch of logos, really what this represents for us, for New Profit and our partners, is the need in this moment to have massive humility. We know with the unprecedented number of people that are unemployed, that one nonprofit, one employer, one academic institution will not be able to solve this problem alone. And I'm so proud and excited to work with this group of partners who have decided to coalesce around a shared strategy of innovation and innovating for our most vulnerable workers to get them back to work in this future of work. Next slide, please. So the first in our Pong and our challenge, what encompasses the Future of Work CRAN challenge, is the XPRIZE Rapid Reskilling Challenge. We launched both challenges in June, and since that time, we had 118 fully registered teams for the XPRIZE Rapid Reskilling Challenge. And that's really focused on surfacing solutions, accelerated learning programs that will help people train up and get to those, again, living wage jobs. What we're really proud about that we've seen today, data coming out of these challenges, is that 60% of the solution providers, at least one of their leaders identifies as a person of color. Almost 40% of the solutions that were submitted by women. There are over 20 countries represented, and the 38% of the teams are led by first generation graduates. So some people may say, well, why does that matter? Well, it matters because we want to invest in entrepreneurs who understand the lived realities of someone who may be disconnected from the workforce, who may be the first person in their family who is going to school, who understands the lived realities of being a person of color and an entrepreneur of color in this space. And it's our hypothesis, and we'll see what happens, that these solution providers with proximity will bring a different lens and different ideas that maybe we haven't seen before to solving some of these complex problems like unemployment and the skills gap. The next slide. If we look at also MIT Solves, very similarly, we launched with them the Reimagining to Pathways to Employment in the US Challenge. So while XPRIZE is focused on accelerated learning programs, MIT is very focused on the wraparound and what we're now calling essential supports. So once you've upskilled, what else do you actually need to make sure that you can get and sustain a job? So think about things like mentorship, think about skills assessment. We're making sure what are the innovations that we can bring to bear and to introduce to the market. And you'll see here with MIT Solves, the solvers who have given ideas and they've submitted almost 200 of them are very diverse in relation to their teams and also their leadership. And if you look at the gender divide, again, you've got 50% male, 45% female, 5% other. That's what we want. We want diverse founders, proximate founders who are solving for some of these issues. I recently co-wrote an article for the Social Stanford Innovation Review about the importance of proximate leaders, and my colleague Varun will put it in the chat box. But that'll dig more into what we've seen, New Profit, when we funded proximate leaders, what type of ideas have come out of those relationships, and how we've seen a different type of impact. We can go to the next slide. So beyond the innovators, the other piece when we think about equity is around centering worker voice. So to do that, we've employed a strategy, which is the Expert Worker Advisory Board, which is the next slide. And so working with our partners, Goodwill Industries and Accenture, we convened a group of workers who had been impacted by COVID, lost their jobs or had been furloughed, and really wanted to understand from them, what does it mean to search for jobs, to upskill and retrain in the moment of COVID? So we have 31 experts. They come across from 11 states, 23 cities. And you see that they have a very varied, education background. But it was really important for us to have this group of people be our sounding board as we developed this strategy. That was first and foremost. The second thing that they are helping us with is judging and selecting the actual solutions and weighing in on both the MIT solutions and the XPRIZE solutions and giving their feedback on why or why not they think these solutions will work for their lives. We also had our experts do solve-a-thons and workshops with our entrepreneurs so that they could have one-on-one interactions, again, with real people who are experiencing this problem. And all of this is just in an effort to make sure that we get better solutions at the end that are coming out of this challenge, that they are, centering equity, worker voice, and really centering the worker's lived experience. And one thing, I'd want to call your attention to this slide. When you think about these experts, I am humbled by just their participation because, as I mentioned, they are dealing with the complexities of COVID, job searching, doing remote schooling of their kids at home. And when we asked them the reasons why they joined the expert advisory board, the first reason was that they wanted to be in community and they wanted to help others. And the second reason is that they want to learn skills. So even in the midst of this pandemic, you've got people who have this appetite, who want to learn and who want to help. And that excites me because that gives me hope for when we get past this pandemic, how we create a more equitable future of work where we're involving the people who are normally at the margins. We go to the next slide. So the last piece of the pillar when we're thinking about our worker advisory board is, one is they're giving us their insights, but one thing that we truly believe in at New Property is like reciprocity. So really thinking about what are they getting in return for their engagement? How are we learning from them? So one is, from them, we're learning from their research, their insights, not only on the tech solutions, but like what is happening on the local level in their communities. The second piece of it is our experts are acting as advisors and they're able to build their skills in doing so. When we're asking them what matters most to them, I'll give you an example. We give them stipends for their time. And we found out from half of our experts that they're experiencing the digital divide where literally, they're having trouble with access to broadband internet. And so when we thought about giving them stipends for that, one thing that they told us about was that it's an issue if they make too much money, if we have to give them a W-9 because then they hit a benefits cliff. And so as we listen to them and we listen to the barriers that they have to upskilling and for us even compensating them for their time, we have to remember that as philanthropies, as employers, as innovators, as when working with them so that we can create solutions that work for them. And so what we were able to do was to come up with a laptop loaner program, right? We were able to rent Wi-Fi for our experts. So again, thinking about creative workaround solutions so we can keep our workers involved. And speaking of the idea of reciprocity, one thing that our worker advisory board members are doing by being part of this process, they're also building their own technical skills. They're becoming better consumers of technology and understanding what works from them under which context. And we think that that's a powerful learning beyond our grand challenge. And additional to that, we are also giving them one-to-one coaching support and career support. Like we said, everyone needs an adult, a thought partner to help them navigate this world of literally infinite possibilities. So the next slide just shows the last piece of our puzzle. We talked about the entrepreneurs, we talked about the workers, but when we're thinking about systems change, partnering with our partners at Jobs for the Future, we're really thinking about how can we reinvent, modernize, collaborate with the workforce boards and job centers across the country to make sure that these innovations in accelerated learning programs and wraparound supports are actually meeting the people and reaching the people who need them the most. So for some of you who don't know about workforce boards, on the next slides, I will go over this quickly for you. Workforce boards are semi-government entities. What I found striking when I started this work is that in 2019, 1 in 12 Americans went to workforce boards for upskilling opportunities and to look for jobs. And when we talk about the population that we care most about, when we think about the 73 million Americans who don't have a high school degree, when we think about people who are not earning a living wage, this is the place, these workforce boards and job centers are the place where millions of Americans are turning to for job placement, especially during this shutdown. Next slide. This New York Times article just talks about how there's an unevenness when you go to job boards or workforce centers. It depends on what neighborhood you live in. It depends on what state that you're in. And that's not to any fault of the job seeker. And so what we aim to do on the next slide is to really think about how we can partner with boards. This is one job seeker, and his story was that, he went to his local, was laid off. Joe was laid off and went to his local job center for upskilling training. He went through a 12-week program, and at the end of the 12-week program, there wasn't a job for him. And there's many job seekers who've had this challenge. And so one thing that we did with the Future of Work Grand Challenge is we talk about the accelerated learning programs, we talk about the wraparound supports, but the entrepreneurs who will win the prize challenge, they will win based on the number of people that they train and actually place in jobs with living wages. So our eye is truly towards getting people placed in jobs with living wages. Next slide. So overall, in closing, when we think about New Profit and our future of work strategy, and we share this with our peers, we share this with our fellow collaborators, we're really focused on 3 pillars. 1, surfacing solutions, best-in-class solutions, and having them targeted towards entry-level workers and workers who are experiencing low wages. Some of you probably won't be surprised to know that employers spend 80% of their professional development dollars on their highest paid employees. We'd like to flip that and see more investment with employees who are at the entry level, middle level, so that they can have actual chance for advisement. When you talk to workers, when you ask them where they expect to learn new skills, they're expecting to learn them on the job. They're expecting to learn them in the community. So we're hoping to meet that need. So after we surface these innovations, we want to validate them. And that's why we see our workforce boards as critical thought partners in that process. We are going to take the solutions and actually pair them, job seekers, with our entrepreneurs to see how many people that they can train and place in jobs. And then with the partnership with Jobs for the Future and Brandeis University, we're going to document what we've learned about what works, what didn't work, and when it did work, who did it work with and for why, and be able to share those learnings nationally. And that's our goal, is to scale that impact and to scale that learnings to additional workforce boards and also to additional employers and additional researchers and friends that are in philanthropy who are making workforce investments, and we're hoping that they may choose to make them a little bit differently. So with that, I would love to bring on my colleague, Josh Copus, who is the director over at Jobs for the Future, JFF Labs, just to talk about their perspective and why they decided to join on to the Future of Work Grand Challenge.
Thanks, Angela, for inviting me to participate. I can say, Angela, I'm continually overwhelmed every time we get together, just about for as short a time as we've known each other, just how aligned our philosophies are on how we approach this work, and the potential that we see not only in these systems to really confront change head on, but also the potential that we see in people. I know that for a lot of folks on the line who are familiar with me and some of my work, you know that I've actually devoted most of my career to trying to understand how we expand on the promise of the nation's workforce system as we know it. This article that Varun just shared, I thought I had read all of Angela's work. I guess I haven't, but this potential in proximate leaders to really drive change in their communities and be responsible for kind of helping craft their own destiny as a community, for what work they want to be doing and what work provides dignity and value to the people that live in and around them, is what has really driven me and continues to drive our transformation work at JFF. I recently produced a piece on X Prize's website that kind of chronologues how I got here, and my story is very much rooted in what I was able to observe in my very early days in Pittsburgh, working with the local workforce board, seeing that power of proximate leaders, seeing what happens when community leaders and business leaders and philanthropic leaders come together to really confront change head on. Pittsburgh, I think, experienced, some of the changes we're now all confronting as a country and as a globe, maybe a little earlier than others. And I think, Angela, the thing is, I've spent 12 years now in Washington, D.C. And I think maybe despite that time in Washington, D.C., or maybe because of it, I'm increasingly convinced the kind of the true keys to innovation, the true keys to really starting to chart a new course for what the future of work should and could look like, particularly for people that have been left out in the future of work conversation as we know it, lies within those communities, lies within those workforce boards, lies within those job centers and those community-based organizations that the workforce system partners with, to help 20 million people a year navigate an increasingly dynamic set of circumstances that are preventing them from reaching their true potential. And Angela, our first conversation we had, I still think about it because you would have thought you and I were working to figure all this out for years because of how much what you've been able to do in pulling together the technology partners with MIT Solve and XPRIZE to help us actually get to a set of solutions that we think are viable, that we think hold promise for helping communities respond to some of the challenges that they're dealing with right now. And then linking that up with the public workforce system, not only in an effort to really expand on the potential that you and I both believe is embedded within that system, but also, trusting in others, trusting in proximate leaders who are closest to the work to help us validate these solutions, to test our assumptions. That's what this is all about for me. And I think, if you ask me what JFF and JFF Labs is doing, broadly to try and encourage more transformation within the workforce system, this grand challenge, I think, is a cornerstone of our work now, and I hope well into the future.
Now, Josh, this is great, and we were kindred spirits, like you said, when we met. I am a newcomer to the workforce conversations, but spent 2 years talking to over 60 boards and just really learning a lot about what happens and what's different in different communities. And then again, when I discovered your work at JFF really focused on boards, I saw how complementary it is. And I'm just curious just to hear from you, if you could just talk a bit more about the workforce board work that you and JFF had been doing, previous to this, like months before the Future of Work Grand Challenge.
Of course. So I actually, I came to JFF Labs from the National Association of Workforce Boards, really with an express interest in trying to more deeply investigate how workforce boards were evolving, particularly how that evolution was both being prompted and powered by new tools and technology, both tools and technology as we would define them as consumer-facing tools. How is technology being used in job centers to help workers access career navigation resources, to access more accelerated learning opportunities, as well as looking inward at the workforce board themselves to try and understand what were some of the tools that they were using for data collection, for data analytics, for really improving their operational effectiveness and understanding how to expand upon the potentials that those organizations really have as core capabilities, and how would technology play a role in really helping expand on that potential. So, Angela, I set out on this endeavor really focused in on, trying to document specific tools and more specific use cases of the whiz bang, kind of stuff that I saw emerging. And we captured a lot of that, and it's been valuable. But in some ways, that 9 months of research, Angela, really has kind of grown into more of a behavioral framework of what I was able to see and observe from, some of the most, innovative leaders in the workforce development space. We refer to them as future forward behaviors. But essentially, it's some of those often hard to qualify and quantify things that proximate leaders and that workforce boards do, really to help inspire and help workers and learners navigate change at the local level.
Yep.
And
I was gonna say it's really fascinating because I shared with you, like, I interviewed 60 boards, but the other half of my job was trying to convince entrepreneurs who are like in
Yep.
this accelerated learning space to like look at this population, to look at entry level workers, because a lot of startups, they're really focused where they can get customers. So I mentioned earlier that 80% of employers are spending their professional development dollars on their highest paid employees. So no one was really attuning to this to entry level workers. And so as I went out to find what I was hoping to be the best and most promising innovations and talking to innovators, I found that they had never heard of workforce boards. And that's why I authored that piece, the best kept secret. And I'll give you an example. There's one entrepreneur, he just recently went on to raise $10 million, but his name is Ruben Harris. He has a program, Ruben.
He just raised a bunch of money too.
Yeah, he just raised a bunch of money, Career Karma. And when I first met him, I told him what I was doing with the Future of Work Grand Challenge and that we were going to take solutions and validate with workforce boards. And he was like, workforce boards, tell me more, right? And I end up telling him, go and give him the spiel on why you should partner with workforce boards. And then we hung up the phone and we didn't talk for a couple of months. Next thing I know, I get a message from him and he says, Angela, you know what? I heard what you said about workforce boards and I reached out to a board in Washington State and now we're partnering. And they're going to have laptops and Career Karma in their local job centers. And for me, I said, there's so many other entrepreneurs out there who are ready to partner. And then to your point, there's these future forward leaders and boards. I don't know how the two would meet unless there was someone bringing them together and doing some matchmaking. I don't know. Tell me what you think.
Angela, that's my exact experience. And I mean, I think in some ways that's what motivated my, my jump from NAWB to JFF Labs was, I was seeing this potential for a convergence. I was getting a lot of those calls too.
Yes.
But I said to myself, how do we get to a place where this entire matchmaking, this kismet that we know is possible between technologists and entrepreneurs and proximate leaders and workforce boards and job centers isn't just up to Angela making an email introduction to somebody in Washington State who connects with Ruben. So I think that that is one of, I think and I hope, one of the most critical parts of the Grand Challenge as we've designed it, is I think it does create not only kind of a person-powered bridge between the tools and technologies that we suspect can help accelerate the kinds of activities that workforce boards are seeing and hearing workers and learners demanding in this new world of work. But it also is starting to provide some actual rigor and some deep user feedback into that process to really make sure that we are doing our best to align those opportunities where product can really meet purpose and can meet problems in a way that those can be tackled together with these two worlds that for a long time haven't been meeting. And Angela, if I could too, I also want to add that that's a core concern for me, especially around the equity imperative here.
Yes. Is
that for all my time in this space, I've seen a lot of cool tools and technologies built and put up on the internet, and everybody will benefit from them. No, they won't. People with internet will. People who understand how to leverage some of these tools already. People have been introduced to an LMS as part of their community college experience or a 4-year experience.
Yes.
The workers and learners that I know you and I are thinking about every day, and that I know our brothers and sisters in the public workforce system are thinking about every day, they have not been privy to those innovations. They have not been privy to those kinds of tools and technologies. And in my mind, until we find a way to embed those things in this community infrastructure with workforce boards, with job centers, with their community partners at Goodwills and United Ways, we're going to continue to be kind of creating a system that, has always been inequitable, but now we're digitizing the inequities. And that's just not going to fly.
Josh, I just want to double click on what you said, because people call me every day, and they, as a philanthropist, as an investor, they tell me everything, all the great things they're doing with technology on the web. I'm like, well, how are you reaching? My question is always, how are you reaching that person? I saw a video the other day. There was a kid doing remote school outside of a Taco Bell, getting onto their Wi-Fi. Right? Like, how are you reaching his mom and dad? How are we reaching the folks who are accessing the internet through their phone? And if you've not thought about that in your strategy, like, you're not doing anything innovative. It's just marketing. And it's not popular to say that. And sometimes people don't like it, but we have to really push ourselves to think about, how do we reach the people at the margins who really need this the most? It's critical.
I absolutely. And I think, one of the other things that I'm really excited about, particularly as we dig into some of the work with our local partners in the workforce board, is another thing that's often overlooked when we look at these kind of tech-driven training solutions, is how important the freedom to learn is, and about how so many of us, myself included, took that for granted, right? The university systems figured this out, right? We're going to put a roof over your head. We're going to give you a meal voucher. We'll take care of it all. You just focus on learning.
Right.
That is not an opportunity that everybody is gifted with. I do know that is something that workforce boards and career counselors and navigators and the one-stops and job centers try to create that kind of room for people every day. And I hope in this work, Angela, it's not going to be the easy part of the work, but not only is there a story to be told here about the intervention of the entrepreneur and the intervention of this really kind of amazing set of tools and tech-driven training products that can help people really confront some of these changes, not only presented by the future of work, but presented by COVID. But there's also a story to be told here about those kinds of supports that, you talked about it in your keynote, around, having a mentor, having a coach, having a car, having that, that time and that space to dedicate to learning and to trying to transition from one career to another. That's not something that we should be asking people to do from 10 p.m. to midnight. We should be working to figure out how to create that space so that everybody truly does have that freedom to learn and that freedom to retrain. And I think from a public policy perspective, until we take that seriously, any calls for a massive retraining effort in the United States, I don't think we're taken seriously until we start calling more attention to those other resources and those other supports that we know every learner needs to be successful,
Right.
no matter how good the technology.
No, and also we've seen it, right? Like I've been talking a lot about childcare as an essential right. We've seen women who make $150,000 or $200,000 a year leave the workforce because they don't have childcare. So like, what did we think was happening with a woman who made $15 an hour, right? And so these are very true what you're saying, these essential supports. We're gonna open it up for questions in one moment, but Josh, I do wanna leave on a high note. As you think about this grand challenge and you think about what we're trying to accomplish, a year from now, if we're talking about this was successful, what would you like to have said about JFF's contribution and your contribution to the work? Like, what would need to be true and different?
A year, is this a year from now?
A year from now.
We have these replicable playbooks in the hands of thousands of workforce professionals, career counselors, and career navigators all over the country. We've identified a core set of entrepreneurs and technology solutions that have proven themselves to be incredibly effective in helping our initial cohort of Americans connect with new occupations, helping them manage this transition from a job they've probably lost due to COVID to a new occupation. And I think, Angela, maybe it's too aggressive to think about us doing it in 1 year. But I mean, I could really see the work that we're doing with, our 5 or 6 pilot sites and, our dozen or so entrepreneurs, growing to be something that is highly replicable across the entire, national workforce system. Angela, you've heard me talk before about all entrepreneurs and technologists I've ever talked to are always fascinated by the potential of scale.
Yes.
The public workforce system is one of the greatest avenues for scale that this country has when it comes to education and training and helping workers transition from previous occupations to new occupations. And, as far as the American Job Center network goes, there's more American Job Centers out there than there are Home Depots, Chick-fil-A's, Targets. So you want to talk about an opportunity to embed new strategies, new way of thinking, and new tools to really help empower a cohort of America that has oft been forgot about when it comes to education and training. That's what I'm targeting. I hope that's what you're targeting too.
That's exactly what we are. And like we said, like you ended on the last note that I was thinking, like really making sure that we committed to this equitable recovery, right? This equitable future of work, because we know that it wasn't working for a lot of people before. So we can't, return to normal. Business is normal. We need a new normal. And I do want to just give a shout out to the 6 boards that we're working with, because without them, their trust, their collaboration, like we wouldn't be able to do this. So we're working with boards in Hampton Roads, Virginia. We're working with boards in San Diego Partnership, West Michigan, Hartford, Connecticut, and also I always pronounce this wrong and I'm in Boston, but Worcester, Massachusetts. I think I got it right this time. Just want to thank you all just for your partnership, your support, and just really excited to do this work. And so now we'll open up to any questions or comments, Jamea.
Awesome. This was great. I have questions, but I'm going to hold them. We have a lot of questions.
Yeah.
So one is, what are the metrics that you all are using to monitor the success of your investments? I would think this is probably around the X Prize.
Yeah.
How are you going to measure this?
So there's a couple ways that we're looking at, like, how do we measure our success? One is around, like, did we, just with the teams itself, did we meet our goals about getting a diverse set of problem solvers? And you saw that. That's one benchmark that we started with. That was like hands down. Our second benchmark was like making sure that we had actual workers that we had integrated into the process. So that's happening. Third, as it comes to the X Prize, our goal to those entrepreneurs is that they place and train 500 workers in living wage jobs according to the MIT wage calculator. So very hard numbers. So we'll know how close we got or if we hit over to that. But that's what we're looking at it. Like, have we measurably improved like the outcomes for these job seekers?
Yeah, and the X Prize puts some pretty solid numbers on.
Yes.
Number trained, right? That's pretty solid.
Well, and I'll tell you, that wasn't very popular, and Josh will probably chime in and talk about this. There are a number of boards that we went to, and they said, we can train people, but we don't want to. We're not for sure we can guarantee that they're placed.
Right.
And for us, it was like really identifying and being willing to work with a group of partners that were as committed to placement as training, because we know that anyone who goes to get trained, they're doing it for a reason, and that's typically to get a job.
That's right. Well, most likely, for sure. Chemo, aloha, chemo Kippen, Josh. What about apprenticeships? Is what chemo says.
I will say, Chemo, we haven't dug into that just yet. I do know that there's some budding opportunity with our partners in Capital Workforce Partnership in particular. They're a part of several national apprenticeship initiatives, and I know are really zeroed in on trying to capitalize on apprenticeship and work-based learning as as a foundational tool that organization is using to help retrain. I think some of this, Angela, is still contingent for us to see what kind of solutions we may be working with, both on the XPRIZE side and the MIT Solve side of things. But Chemo, yeah, I can promise you that it is certainly coming up in the conversations and our consultations with our pilot partners around this opportunity to integrate some of these new tools and accelerated training models into their apprenticeship and work-based learning programs that they already have underway, but certainly even figuring out whether there's opportunities to explore new opportunities in apprenticeship and work-based learning, given what we might see come through the two challenges.
Yeah, and I will add, I've looked at a couple of the submissions, and there are a few that incorporate apprenticeships. So we'll see if they make it to the finals. One thing I didn't share is that we are going to narrow down all of the 308 applicants. We got to like 20 semifinalists that we're going to validate and market. So we'll see which, to Josh's point, which one of those make the cut.
Yeah. That's great. We all know it takes a lot of resources to invest in someone over the long haul to get to a living wage, especially if they've had these barriers to employment after decades of unequal investment in education. So does the prize give boards more funding to be able to meet these challenges? And how are you going to measure and protect against cherry picking or creaming in the challenge, choosing participants who might have succeeded anyway?
Right. So we agree with the boards on who the criteria that we're looking at. So for it to count towards this challenge of someone that they've trained, it has to be a person who didn't earn a living wage last year, who does not have a 4-year degree, and that has other barriers to employment, right? And so we understood that there could be some cherry picking, but like if someone meets those criteria, like they still have some real barriers to work. So we're hoping that by putting that criteria in place, that we're actually speaking to that.
Great. So you haven't talked about K-8, K-12's role, and from what I understand with MIT and XPRIZE, it's really focused on workers, right?
It's post-second. You think post-secondary and workforce. It's some of these programs could be an alternative to post-secondary. They could be additive.
So regarding to the XPRIZE, what have you learned so far? What is working on strategy number 3 relating to getting displaced workers into jobs with a living wage?
Yep. So that phase hasn't started yet. So a couple of things that we have done with XPRIZE is that we are working through Strata Education Network with MC and understanding for we're going into 6 local markets with partnerships with workforce advisory boards. What we've used is like real-time data analytics to understand who's hiring in those markets right now. We've given that information to the solution providers. So we feel like the first step is to make sure we're training for jobs that already exist that meet the criteria that we want with a living wage. And so the experiment will kick off in first quarter of next year. And so we'll have more to share from that based on what we learn.
I just want to double click on Angela's point too around kind of the embedded commitment to using data to drive our decision making across all of this work. It's a key pillar in our modernization strategy at JFF. It's one of the things that I've heard consistently as I've both literally traveled the country talking to workforce boards. Is really trying to not only use labor market information data through MZs, and Angela, we also have JobCase as a partner. Yes. Who's going to help us with some of the kind of the marketing and recruitment analytics that can really, I think, help workforce boards expand beyond our usual marketing tactics. I think that's one of the big challenges for our pilot partners here is the, workforce boards have had a steady stream of customers, right? Literally coming through the job centers.
Right.
That's not so much the case anymore. So there's a huge opportunity here for us to kind of expand our capabilities as a workforce system around using new digital channels and using data to help us better connect with people that are primed for these kinds of opportunities. So I would say not only is that running in the background of everything that we're doing, but we've really modeled a lot of the work that we know we'll have to do on having really high quality access to data and a real commitment to analyzing and understanding what that data means and what decisions we need to base on what we're learning.
Right. Annalise from Brookings did comment that, the several people have commented to me, even via text, that this importance of this underserved and really broadening access is huge, including, Annalise says, the need to tap into job centers as community resources and needs for childcare and support career transitions. And I know the work we did with families in employment within AWB and you, Josh, I mean, so much of the barrier is childcare and transportation. It's huge.
I mean, Jamae, it's one of the number one things I've heard over the last 10 months. I mean, it is the issue that is preventing so many families and so many people from getting back to work. So I think I will say, Angela is the fundraiser in chief here.
Yeah.
But I will say, I hope as this work grows and as we start to, better understand and chronicle where there is potential for additional investment beyond just providing some capacity to the workforce boards and certainly the significant prizes that are being offered to the entrepreneurs. Angela, I'll say to you publicly, if you're okay with it, and I do hope there are opportunities for New Profit and JFF to really team up to try and investigate where there are other opportunities to inject new types of capital, to help solve for some of these other issues that we know workers are dealing with as they're in transition and as they're working to pursue new types of training and connect with new occupations.
Yeah, in fact, Josh, you can say it because I think it's critical. And as I'm talking to other philanthropies out there and foundations, and specifically in these 6 communities that we're going in, as I talk to partners in those areas, I said, this is an opportunity for you to try new pilots. Like, what does it mean to give transportation vouchers, internet vouchers to the people who are going through this process? And so that's a conversation that's ongoing, but it's something that it's top of mind for me because, again, we know as soon as someone's car breaks down, right, they're not able to get to their training, no fault of their own, or if they have a childcare issue. So we really do need to attune to these things in service of that equity, right? A friend of mine from Kellogg, she always says, Tamisha Bridges, she goes, you can't train your way to equity, right? There's some other things that we need to come to the table with, and these essential supports are it, in my opinion.
And that's why I love Liddy Romero's work with the work-life partnership, because they do so much of that, in Colorado and elsewhere. So I think we've answered most of the questions. I just wanted to make a comment. We have like 3 minutes left. This morning, I reposted something Todd Tauber from Degree posted, and it relates back to what Michael Brickman from Department of Ed said yesterday. We're a long, long way from a true equitable skills-based hiring. I mean, we have random acts of it, and these will be regional and will help support the data behind it. But Todd Tauber posted something about corporations are looking more at AI for all of their selections. So Josh, going back to this, how in the world are we going to get workforce development boards to up their ante in being innovative around hiring? Because if corporations are going to AI, it still just kills the equity. And I posted, well, great, is the AI going to think like humans, which is bias, requires degrees, or requires experience? So what's your final comments on this AI, this technology, and how it's not going to crush equity? Both of you.
Yeah,
Angela?
I can start and then Josh, you can go in. So AI is real and it's an issue. And if people are very interested in this, there's a researcher out of MIT has done a lot around AI and bias. And one thing we have to do as investors is invest in technologies that are solving for the bias in AI and analytics. There's several companies. I was talking to a woman yesterday, a founder of a company called Landed, for example. There's another one, the Gradient Group, that are looking at, again, how do you input a job seeker's information, but take out those other things, right? That about identity, about background, so that people can be judged on the skills that they're bringing to the table. So I think it's going to be important as investors, right? We're creating this future. When you talk about these technologies, that means someone's invested. That means an employer has bought them. And so that's why we have to hold like investors accountable, and we have to hold employers accountable for what they're doing and really make the invisible visible and make the undiscussable discussable, if that makes sense. So having these conversations and people who are out there who are using these technologies, you know, letting them know that this does not work in this market right now. Josh.
Hopefully the new head of labor will maybe help with that. Josh, closing
Yes.
comments.
I mean, I think everything Angela said is exactly right. I will say, I think it's the same thing we've been talking about this whole time is right. This next wave of AI technologies and predictive analytics and all this stuff it can't just be cooked up in a lab, you know, by a small group of people with a certain set of biases, with a certain narrow set of lived experiences,
Yes.
right? We need to start introducing these concepts to, you know, a broader group of people within the communities. Angela, maybe we'll find a way to tackle some of it within the context of the challenge. Even I think that's going to be a big part of it. Is I think those of us that, you know, still find, you know, some of those concepts to be too daunting, or, you know, we don't know enough about that to participate. That can't be true. You know, we need more people leaning in and providing that kind of perspective, and Jamae raising those kinds of alarm bells and red flags, and frankly, kind of holding technologists responsible. I don't think it's being done intentionally. It's just being done because, you know, there's not that commitment to kind of a more inclusive approach to how these things are designed and what the auxiliary consequences of them may or may not be.
Yeah, I think we're developing our next session because I know a couple of amazing innovators that are thinking about AI and doing this work, and they can come in and talk about how they're doing it more equitably. It will blow your mind. I've learned so much.
Angela, I think we need to call up some of our friends at google.org, because I can think of some people that would definitely.
That's what I said, exactly. All the folks we've met.
That's awesome. Well, on behalf of Closing and all of the attendees and all of the community, thank you guys. This was great. There's lots of comments saying thank you, excellent, all that. So appreciate you all. And Close the community. This will be posted, knowing Tiffany, pretty quickly in the community, and we will be in touch and see you next year. But happy holidays, everybody stay safe, and thank you again.
Thank you. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.